Okay, good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to those of you, and good evening to you in Europe. And welcome to the Packard Network Live. My apologies for the technical problem. Everything went down right at the time that we were scheduled to go live. So thank you very much for tuning in. And I'm expecting my special guest today to pop in here any moment. And we'll get rolling with the program as scheduled as well. I'm really pleased and grateful for all of you for tuning in to my live programs for the second consecutive year. Very grateful for that. And today will be the final program of this year, and I have an all-star lineup planned for January of next year. So stay tuned for that as well. While we're waiting on the technical issues to sort themselves out, I'm going to start introducing my very special guest today, Colonel Carla D. Bass, who is retired from the United States Air Force. And we're going to talk a bit about that in a moment. Carla, welcome to the program, and I think we're finally both online and things are working now, so we'll get this program on track.
Delighted to join with you and your audience. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great, fantastic. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking to all of you about Carla and her career and why she is definitely top-notch in everything that she does, both what she's achieved throughout her life. We'll hear a part of her story, and then we'll also hear what she's doing now to impact people as a private citizen as well. So, but first of all, Carla is one of the very few women of her generation to reach this rank that I spoke about, and she served in multiple leadership positions, basically all over the world. She was the director of intelligence operations in a combat environment. Going to talk about that in a few minutes as well. She was a group commander leading nearly 3,000 Air Force personnel assigned to the NSA, the National Security Agency. She was Defense and Air Attaché to Bulgaria, representing the American military to Bulgarian counterparts. She, throughout her 45-year career, 30 of which were in the Air Force, 15 with a federal agency. And by the way, Carla's coming to us live from Washington, D.C. today, and where she's lived for a number of years. And she's composed items that have been submitted to Congress, to the White House, to generals, to ambassadors. She's undertaken, obviously, hundreds of performance reviews, award nominations, budget justifications, and all sorts of national level strategies. She is an expert at how to write powerfully with impact, to influence, and to basically grab whatever prize that you're looking to get. And that could range, we'll talk in a few minutes, from a job, if you're talking about a resume, but it can also range to writing more effective performance appraisals of people. And if you want to talk about making an impact on people as a former leader of literally thousands of people, if you can really get this down, you can make a big impact on motivation and performance assessment by mastering the type of techniques that Carla's talking about as well. Carla has also authored a multiple award-winning book, Right to Influence. And now that book is in its second edition. And she also is giving on a regular basis highly acclaimed workshops to government agencies, to corporations, to private businesses, to non-governmental organizations and academia. And she also offers private coaching as well. So Carla, I'm going to pause right there, take a sip of water, and that's a huge list of credentials, but I'd like to welcome you again to the program, and please highlight anything important that I might have missed during that.
No, you hit it all. I sometimes don't, it's hard to believe that describes me.
I think that's great. Well, let's get into it. So I want to kind of cover two things in the remaining time that we have left, and also for the audience, before we get into that, thank you for those of you that are tuning in live. Please do let me know where you're tuning in from, and let me know if you're watching this live or on replay. And obviously, I think most of you will see this on replay. I know that there'll be at least a few thousand people over the weekend that see this. So please do tee up any questions or comments or dialogue in the comments section. And Carla and or I will be very happy to respond to that, even if it's not live. But for those of you that are live now, please tee up your questions. I'll be kind of popping over to LinkedIn to capture those comments, and we'll certainly recognize you for being here, and we'll also be addressing your questions in real time. So Carla and I will get into the conversation right now, and so please start teeing up your thoughts for those of you watching. So Carla, tell me, when you were, let's go back to your childhood, and did you ever dream that you would be where you are today, when, as far back as you can remember?
No, but I always knew I wanted to be in the Air Force. So just a real quick, because that's where the journey began.
Sure.
I was in 7th grade. It's the middle of the Vietnam War. My father, also a retired Air Force colonel, was then active duty and into intelligence. And my mother kept chastising me about, don't ask your father any questions about what he does, because you'll embarrass him. He can't answer. She did that once too often, and that's why I decided in 7th grade, if I couldn't ask questions, I would join Air Force intelligence myself. And that's what I did. 7th grade, that's where I was headed.
So you had a dream to be in the Air Force, right? Where did that come from?
I was raised in a very patriotic family, God, country family. My main inspirations were obviously my parents, and I've got some advice they gave to me I'd like to share with your listeners at some point, but John Wayne and Bob Hope. So love of country was instilled in us in a very, very early age. And so for me, it was just a natural follow-on to follow my father's course. So that's why, 7th grade Air Force intelligence, here I come. It's just a matter of marking time until I could get there.
Wow, that's absolutely fantastic. What a great vision, a dream that you've had. And you actually lived that dream, and you're still living it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Tell us a bit about, I know that a lot of people, when they saw the announcement that you're coming on the program, they said, wow, this is fantastic. We would love to hear from the colonel what it was like to be near the battlefield, near combat operations. You have any short story you could just kind of satisfy the appetite of them that you're allowed to talk about on was there ever adrenaline rushes? Was there big fear? Was there glory experienced? Anything that you'd like to share from those days? I know that people would really appreciate hearing.
Sure. That time frame precedes the world that we're in now. So I was at that point the director of intelligence operations for Operation Northern Watch. At that point, Saddam Hussein was still commanding Iraq. We had imposed a no-fly zone, so U.S. and coalition aircraft would every day patrol over the northern portion of Iraq, and Saddam would try to shoot them down. So my mission was to identify where it was he had his ground-to-air artillery, brief the pilots before they launched, and then more importantly, while they were actually flying over the hazardous area, keep track on what was going on the ground and relay near real-time information to them so that they could stay safe and whenever possible, take out the artillery that was threatening them.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point in time, that was the only shooting war that was ongoing. It's the only place that our pilots were actually at risk. What was it like? I didn't sleep much during that 6-month period. Never had I known Air Force intelligence to be more important than it was in that particular mission, because it was saving lives. And then, of course, you always had to be prepared for what happens if we lost a plane in the area. So you had the search and rescue mission that was, you always had to be prepared to execute that as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, you led nearly 3,000 Air Force personnel. Is that right, at one point?
Right. It was 2,800. So I was the group commander up at NSA. I had 7 squadrons under me, and that was the total number of Air Force military and civilian personnel assigned to NSA at that point.
Okay, fantastic. So what was that like for, I mean, nearly 3,000 people is a lot of people, right? A lot of people, a lot of different functions, a lot of, different, obviously, a huge responsibility for 2,800 lives. And tell us what that was like from a leadership perspective. I mean, that must have been the first time in your life that you had led that many people, I imagine.
It was. That assignment was fascinating because at that point, I was actually like a mini base commander. In addition to having that number of people, I was responsible for, I think it was 6 dormitories, the legal system, the gym, the dining facility, everything that you would imagine in an Air Force base. I was responsible for that also. I had the 7 squadron commanders. So the first thing I had to teach myself was, because I'd been a squadron commander previously also, that's where this whole right to influence journey began. But the first thing I had to learn was, if I did X as a squadron commander, then I need to not do that now, because those functions belong to squadron commanders. So that took me just a little bit to figure out what the role of the group commander was. My role as a group commander was facilitating the jobs of the squadron commanders, who then directly touched all of the people within their squadrons. So I had to, work the budget justifications for the dormitory, training programs. I developed a lot of training programs, not just at NSA, but throughout my career, to help professionally develop the company grade officers, the enlisted troops. My idea was to do everything I could to infuse whatever wisdom I had amassed to others, so that when I retired, I knew I had done everything possible to set my Air Force up for success. So it was a lot of hands-on. One thing I wanted to share, I talk a lot about the power to write. It opens doors. So here's an example. If you can write well, you can work miracles. So when I arrived at the 694th at NSA, it was in July. I had no time to affect the Air Force ball that was happening that September. It was a miserable event. There were only 200 and maybe 40 people that attended out of 2,800 plus spouses. It was boring, it was dull, and I vowed that was it. Next year is going to be different. What had happened is, when Air Force personnel work, well, actually probably all military personnel, when you work in a civilian environment, you lose touch of the Air Force esprit de corps. And for me, that was my heartbeat. So what I needed to do was identify a speaker that people would stand in line to come here. So General Hayden was the director of NSA at that point. I asked General Hayden for permission to invite the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Okay, for me, that was like reaching up and touching God, to have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff be the speaker. And so I crafted a 1-page invite. I explained how I needed his help to reinvigorate the esprit de corps. I wrapped that letter in camouflage netting. I crammed into it a little flag that was taped to a stick that my second grade daughter had made for me the day before. And that constituted the invitation. And
Wow.
he came. And we had 600 people, max capacity for the Marriott. I had a waiting list for tickets that might become available. I placed at each place setting a balsam wood airplane. So throughout the evening, we were flying airplanes. It accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, but it wouldn't have happened if I couldn't write that kind of a compelling invitation. That's the power of writing.
Absolutely. And obviously, I mean, you applied a lot of creativity just to make sure that he opened it, right? Mm-hmm. And then to read it as well. And I think that's an important point is how creative would it be to wrap it up in that and put a little flag on it and that type of thing. How could he not open it up when he saw that? That's fantastic, Carla. And so I want to just go back before we get into talking in detail about writing powerfully. Back to the transition that you just touched on from being kind of an individual contributor into a leader. That's highly relevant around the world today. And in the United States today, there's something that's been trending and going on now for a couple of years called the Great Resignation, where people are just kind of fed up with corporate culture and the way that putting profits before people. A lot of people are they're just sick and tired of the shareholder first way of doing things. And so, and one of the causes of this are ecosystems that don't put people first. Okay. But also leaders have been promoted up from individual contributors with no training. So they go from back to the point that you mentioned, from an individual contributor into a leadership position. And guess what? Monday morning rolls around and they just migrate to what they have always done, which is the only thing that they know, which is individual contribution. So a lot of the things that you figured out, okay, well, this is how I have to look at things now from a group perspective instead of an individual perspective. My question to you, and you did a great job describing that. My question to you, and really in the form of what advice would you give to first-time leaders that are really good at individual contribution? They've been promoted, and Monday morning rolls around, they suddenly have a team. What advice would you give them to kind of see what you were able to see?
Great question. Okay. So when Dad commissioned me, he gave three pieces of advice that I follow to this very day. One is focus on the mission. Don't get caught up in office politics. 2, keep your sense of humor. But 3, and I foot stomp this, take care of your people and they will take care of you. It's people first and everything follows after that. Now, let me give you a vignette. When I took command of the 324th Intelligence Squadron, that was my first super major assignment. I used a technique called the +3 -3 survey. I asked everybody, all 480 people, I asked them, tell me, if you were running the squadron, tell me 3 strengths of this unit and 3 things you would like to see improved. I will take it signed or not signed. I'll take it on paper. I'll take it on a paper towel. Just tell me what I'm walking into. And what I received, what I learned is that the unit hated itself. The only things that people liked about it, we were in Hawaii, the only things that people regularly complimented, the golf courses, the weather, and Mai Tais. And the list of things that were broken was huge. So the second lesson here is listen to your people and respond to them. So
Right.
I made a list of all the things they wanted fixed. I put a notch by how many times each one of these things was mentioned. And then I fed that
Mm-hmm.
back to the unit. I said, this is what you told me. And based
Mm-hmm.
on the pain that these things are causing, this is what I'm going to tackle first with your help. And we turned the unit around.
Wow. That's fantastic. Yeah.
It works. So the +3 -3 survey, and then respond and talk to the people. I also spent buckets of time. I would sit the mid shifts with them. I would go in at 10 or 11 o'clock at night and sit right
Mm-hmm.
next to the kids that are working the racks, and we talk. So,
Mm-hmm.
so that demonstrated that they had a boss that was willing to come in the ridiculously late hours, because she had to be to
Mm-hmm.
work the first thing the next morning. But you talk to them and you listen and you respond. And all they need to know is that there's someone who cares and who is listening. And that goes so far to spiking morale. I wrote individual birthday cards for each one of the 480 people, just a little 5x8,
Mm-hmm.
cheesy pink, yellow, green, blue. But I would walk around, and damned if they didn't have those little cards thumbtacked to their desk areas. So
Yeah. Wow.
little touches.
Yeah. So showing you care, connecting with them, putting your arm around them, where clearly they understood that you're there to support, to lead, and to cultivate them.
And responding to their suggestions. So you can't just
Yes.
listen and drop. You've got to follow through.
Yeah. Taking action, and
Mhm.
taking the right action that actually will help them, enable them to be the best that they can be. And I think that's the mark, definitely, of a great leader. Carla, that's wonderful as well. I would certainly, it would certainly be my pleasure to work for you. It's that kind of leadership. And I can think of tens of thousands of other people that would do the same thing. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
Let's get into let's bring things current to today. And for those of you tuning in, I know that there's several of you, because I can see the count here, but I'm not seeing any comments come through. So I'm not, I don't know if it's I think there's a problem with LinkedIn this morning, which is why we were delayed. But anyway, just keep them coming. We'll get to them later on the replay if we don't get to it live, but please keep them coming in. And Carla and I will continue to talk about this as well. We're going to dive now into powerful writing. And Carla, maybe you could, why don't you define what that means to you? Because you're definitely an expert in this field, but talk about when you say powerfully, writing powerfully, what specifically do you mean by that?
It means making each word count.
Okay.
And making every second of the reader's time play to your advantage. That's powerful writing.
Absolutely. And we live in a what, 3-second world, 5-second world, where attention spans are
fleeting.
Basically, yeah. And so let's talk about that, because I know a lot of people are really interested to hear what you have to say in some of your tips and methods across different applications for how do you get your message across in a 3 to 5-second world?
Okay. Okay, so the way I explain my methodology, I'm a visual person. So imagine an inverted triangle.
Yes.
The top part is you have to strategize your message. And I've got some examples of how you do that. So you strategize the message. Once you've done that, the bottom part, the pointing end of the triangle, is where you apply the word sculpting tools. I've got 10 word sculpting tools. That's where you hone the message. So by the time you strategize, and that includes knowing the audience and several other strategies, strategize the message, then hone it, and then you're off to the races. The other thing I share is, imagine the white rectangle. The white rectangle is actually the principle of right to influence. It tells you that every author is constrained by two things. You're constrained by the amount of available space. Maybe you're word limited or space limited, or there's a demarcated area on a government form. And you're also time limited because, as we just said, that readers' attention is fleeting. So the author who best leverages time and space, and in that white rectangle, put in big black bold letters, opportunity. Time and space is an opportunity to make your point to the intended audience.
Absolutely, and I think if people can certainly master this, they can get people to stop scrolling in the digital world, or even in the non-digital world as well. I guess what you communicate. So let's talk about. I know that you've helped people frame winning arguments. Okay, so they're trying to make a case for something, a strong case. Maybe you could just give us an example of the method or some things that people can think about if they have a case that they want to make to their boss, to a friend, to a colleague, even to a subordinate, right, as part of engagement. What tips would you give them for kind of putting together a winning formula for making their case successful?
Sure. The cardinal rule is know your audience. You have to write from the audience's, the reader's perspective. Empathy is really critical here. So you have to know, to whom are you addressing? What is their knowledge, their familiarity with your topic? What's their background? What do they define as success? What do they need to hear from you? What do you need to hear from them? Are they technical people, speak in technical terms? Are they policy people, like Congress? If you're trying to justify to Congress a purchase of a major IT system, you don't explain it's going to have so much storage capacity or whatever. You have to explain, from a policy perspective, in terms that they would understand.
Right.
Some of the other strategies that I talk about is don't bury the gold nugget, because people are busy. Make sure that you put the most important information up front. So think in terms, if you only had 15 seconds of this person's attention, what message do you want to get across first? And then triage everything from there. An error that people make a lot nowadays is they have a huge preamble, a very lengthy preamble, and whatever it is they're writing before they get to the main point. Well, you've lost the audience in the preamble. Right. All right. So triage, you get the main point, and then you follow it up with background information or ancillary data, but don't bury the gold nugget. Subliminal words are also important, but that goes more for resumes or performance reviews or what have you.
Could you give us a couple of examples of subliminal words? And what you mean by that on resumes?
Okay, so this example I'm going to read to you, it actually emphasizes two of my strategies. One strategy is add detail to whatever you're trying to write, because detail provides a mental yardstick for the reader to understand exactly what you're trying to explain. So here's the before version. This was based on a resume bullet. Okay. Jane led a team that studied the company's aging IT system. All right, that sounds okay. She led a team, so you got a good verb there, but that doesn't say so what. It completely, it's only half an incomplete tennis swing. The interim would be, the after would be, Jane led an 8-person team on a 3-month study of the company's aging IT system, made 6 recommendations. The CEO accepted all, saved $850,000. Okay, that's the strategy of put detail in. And that applies to resumes, personnel report, budget justifications, contract bids, whatever you're writing. Detail makes the story blossom. Now, subliminal words. The interim would be developed and implemented an innovative marketing strategy that catapulted sales 30%. Okay, so you've got the detail, you've got the so what, but the subliminal word would be this quarter alone.
Right.
Alone is the subliminal word. Now, the next strategy would be emphasize the what, not the how. This is a mistake people make also because we tend to think sequentially. The bell ringer in what I just read is not that she developed and implemented. The bell ringer is that she catapulted the sales. So the final version of that is catapulted sales 30% this quarter alone. That's the what.
Right.
How, which is less important, how by developing and implementing the innovative marketing strategy that others now emulate. All right.
Right. Leadership, a little bit of hidden message on leadership that she's or a pioneer, that she has become a pioneer with something that now other people are replicating.
Yep.
All from the power of one sentence.
Yep. So it's all in the matter of knowing how to tell the story. So the strategy here is hit the what first and then the how, add the detail, the 30% and the subliminal words this quarter alone. Oh, by the way, others are emulating her. So those are just a few of the strategies.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what would you say that if you go back to pick any point of your career has been your most successful win with powerful writing, and could you give an example of your biggest win?
Yep. The moment that changed my life, and it's changed, I mean, countless others as well, was the 324th. When I took command of the 324th, it was the most losing unit in statewide quarterly and annual professional awards. What was happening is well-intentioned supervisors were submitting these wonderful people, but because the supervisors couldn't write well, all of these guys and gals were losing. So it was inadvertently impacting their careers, harming their careers, because your boss can't write. So I took 3 days personal leave. I hid in a beach cabin. I analyzed my writing, and that's where I developed the word sculpting tools, which is part 2 of the book. So I took that little tiny handbook, like 28 pages, turned it into a 1-hour work session, taught my guys how to write, and in scant time, we started sweeping the awards. That was the beginning. And where's, I've got a wonderful quote. I can't find it. I think it's General Atkins, who is MOAA, the commander of MOAA, basically said that, oh, here it is, your training improved the writing of many supervisors, which led to increased professional advancement opportunities for countless numbers of service members. Lieutenant General Atkins, who is the CEO and president of the Military Officers of America Association. But the one accolade that just gave me goosebumps, I received an email, I mean, decades later. Colonel Bass, you probably don't remember me, but I was a senior airman in the 324th. Because you taught me how to write, I was accepted, my application was accepted into officer training school. I just retired after 20 years as a lieutenant colonel, and I'm now the vice president of a defense corporation. Wow. Okay, yeah. You drop a pebble in a pond and you watch the ripples. Sometimes you get feedback on what those ripples are. Often you don't, but you know, that's why I know this stuff makes a difference. I've got so many testimonials like that, and that's the win behind my sales.
Yeah, I mean, to hear that story alone, I mean, obviously that's just a confirmation to you on the impact that you make, because you already know that it works, right? But now you know that you've actually been able to impact another career.
And that's why it's so important for me to share this writing methodology and the techniques, because it makes such a difference. You know, the battle cries I developed from all that is, 1, powerful writing changes lives. Powerful writing is the lifeblood of successful business, and powerful writing will tip the balance between success and failure, because it does all those things.
Right. Absolutely. Let's talk about performance reviews. So let's discuss a bit about, maybe you could tell a story on how your methods have made an impact in this category, because this is an important topic, because everybody knows that there's a lot of leaders out there that wrongly view performance as, oh, it's HR. I got to get 16 of these things done in the next 30 days. How in the world am I going to do it? And then they just start ticking boxes, right? And then the person who deserves probably a professionally written and constructed performance appraisal, they sit down and they basically get their bonus or their compensation communicated to them, and they have no idea where that came from. I mean, that's reality in the corporate world anyway. Could you talk a bit about this and shed some light on it?
Sure. That's been the case in the military as well for decades. So in the back of that little handbook from the 324th, the last page says, every person deserves a boss who can write. That's not always the case. So learn how to write this way yourself. When that poor boss sighs, they often will come to you and say, okay, sigh, it's time for your quarter, your annual performance review. Please give me some input. Okay, so here's where you can take care of yourself. If you learn how to write like the book says, then you give that boss the strategized, the word sculpted, hard-hitting impact that has the detail, what you've done, for whom you did it, what the results were. That way you can help him help yourself. The other thing I like to mention, because folks don't often think about this either, is if you have a good relationship with your boss, if the boss appreciates what you do, it's okay for you to approach him or her and say, there is this major award coming up. Is it okay if I draft something on myself for you to consider submitting? And
right.
Then do it. The other thing is submit your people for awards, and then take credit for that too, because that marks you as an outstanding leader who takes care of the people. But getting back to the specifics of input to performance reviews, I suggest to people that they keep a job journal. If the organization doesn't do weekly activity reports like ours does, then keep a job journal and annotate, not the nitty stuff, but the significant things that you've done and what the impact was. If you've received compliments from anybody, keep track of those. The impacts, the details, the so what, and that way, when the boss comes and says, "Hey, it's time for the input," you don't have to scratch your head and say, "Well, golly gee, what did I do 8 months ago?" Because you've kept a running list of it.
I think that's very powerful advice, and even for what Carla and I are saying here is that even for organizations that do not permit self-assessments, or it's not part of their process, because there is a large number in that category, write it anyway. It's worth doing. Okay, so keep the diary that Carla mentioned, and then prepare your self-assessment ahead of your boss asking you for it, or if they don't even ask for it, write it down anyway and submit it to them. Okay, because actually one of the hidden benefits is you're also going to make their job easier, and you might wind up making your own review look much better than it would be if you relied solely on your boss, who either is unaware of what you did, or that boss just doesn't get what you do. Then you've really documented what you do as well. So this is a very powerful point.
Yep. Now let me talk verbs at this point.
Usually
I hit this in the section on resumes, but this applies to performance reviews also. So I'm going to read three lists of verbs. They each came from from one resume. Each list came from one resume. And listen, the first two are horrible. The third is what you shoot for. And that applies to performance reviews too. So the first list, all from one resume: responsible for, solely responsible for, coordinates, contributor to, provides analysis, provides support, responsible for. Horrible. The second list, provided extensive use of, assist technical staff, provide excellent writing skills, which was not the case, extensive planning, event planning, coordinate, supported, also horrible. This is what you shoot for. One
Right.
resume: exceeded, implemented, directed, initiated, partnered with, integrated, composed, broke new ground. So when you're composing input to your performance review, those are the kind of verbs that you try to use to make yourself stand out from the crowd instead of the responsible for, provided, or contributed to.
Right. Absolutely. And about this specific topic, that they're doing these types of things, or in other words, some of the work that you're doing, Carla, are you also giving ideas to some of your clients that maybe it would be a good idea to do this when they're not doing it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's another reason why people should look to hire you, or look to, ask more about your services, right? Because there's because you've had the opportunity to see thousands of cases, situations, and you've been able to take teams that don't win and convert them into winning teams through these very powerful techniques. So with that comes the gold mine, which I call experience.
Now, here's another strategy I wanted to share with your folks.
Yes, let's do that.
Again, it comes back to writing from the recipient's perspective. Another strategy is frame your message based on questions that the audience might ask. So, for example, if you were writing an ad to sell your house, if you were on the receiving end of that, you'd be asking questions like, what's the square footage? What's the size of the lot? Any upgraded appliances? What's a school district, metro access? So figure out what questions would you ask, and then write your advertisement to that. Going back to Congress, if I were trying to convince Congress to spend multiple millions of dollars on a defense system, the questions Congress would ask me, which means I need to answer it in my initial request, would be, why is this needed? How does this improve the current situation? How will it advance national security? What are the alternatives? Why is yours better than the alternatives? And what happens if we don't fund it? For a grant maker, for the person seeking grants, and I do a lot of workshops helping NGOs on this one, you have to look at it from the grant maker's perspective. How is what you're going to do advance the grant maker's mission? It's not your mission that's central, it's what the grant maker's mission is. So what's the problem to be resolved? Who benefits? What's your experience with this work? What's your action plan? What's your sustainability plan? And how are you going to help me accomplish my mission? So it's all about empathy and writing from the other guy's perspective.
Exactly. And that's where even a lot of businesses, not only in the real world, but in the digital world, with their messaging, they have it off, they're looking at it from the wrong perspective.
Yep.
You want to look at it, and I guess I'll give one of the best examples. When you order an iPhone from Apple and you get that box, there's some excitement as you start to peel off the plastic around it, right? And get that thing open, because you can't wait to turn it on, right? And they've done such a great job. And you know what they do? They make it so easy to open that box up that you can get right after it, and that's really, they've looked at it from the user's perspective, so that not just the anticipation of that box coming in the mail to you, or you going to the store to get it, but they continue to fulfill that expectation, because they thought of the user, peeling open that box and hitting that power button for the first time.
Yep. Now we've talked about resumes and performance reviews. Powerful writing has so many applications. So obviously it's marketing your products and services. It's winning those contracts and grants, but defending the castle. If you've got budget cuts coming, you have to be able to come up with a very good justification on why your budget shouldn't be cut. These are all the things that I bring to you, boss. So go look elsewhere. Expand the empire. If you have a new program or a new project that requires new monies, you have to be able to make a case for that. Publicize good news is another area that people don't think about. If you accomplish something wonderful, my God, that's pure gold. You can craft that into the marketing materials, into media releases, into websites, leverage the good news. If I'm trying to persuade you to partner with me, if I'm trying to extend my influence, I have to explain in persuasive terms how you'll benefit by joining me and the synergy that we will both have moving forward. But I have to convince you of that. Right. Attracting and retaining talented staff, that's always a challenge nowadays. And we already talked about work that occasional miracle. And then the human resources, there's so many applications for powerful writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think you've touched on many of them. There's countless others as well. But one of the things that you just said that resonated really well with me is how, if you look at all of these different applications, Carla, how do you handle somebody that has the mindset that, but I'm just not good at writing? I just don't, I think it's a talent that you're born with and, that type of thing. Frankly, I run across a lot of people that are that way, or they're shy to get on camera because they just feel, wrongly so, that they're just not born with the talent. So can these skills be acquired?
Oh, yes. And it's so easy. So I'm going to answer you by quoting Mary Poppins.
Okay.
Okay. In every job that must be done, there's an element of fun. You find the fun and snap, the job's a game. And so, this whole right to influence stuff, it's not grammar, it's not hard hitting, it's not serious. It has serious implications. But let me talk word sculpting for just a minute.
Yes.
So, I explain this stuff in terms of Rumpelstiltskin, hard-boiled eggs, garden gates. It's fun and it's easy. So there's no need to be intimidated by the concept of, oh my God, I can't write. Writing is it's painting. That you add the detail, it makes the color pop. It's playing chess. You strategize. You know what the other guy wants or what the other guy's contrary opinion is. You strategize to be able to negate his opinion if necessary and advance your own. Okay, word sculpting tools. Making each one of those words count. Verbs. So think about a hard-boiled egg and make the hard-boiled egg about 6 foot tall. Focus on the yolk. The yolk is the verb. The white is the albumum, the stuff that suffocates the verbs nowadays. So here we go. The verbs. Reduce the amount of time equals expedite. Strongly encourage equals urge. Send an inquiry is inquire. Gain benefit from is benefit. Keep to a minimum is minimize. Engage in collaboration is collaborate. So with that particular word sculpting tool, you're chiseling away all the excess garbage and you're cutting straight to the chase of that yolk, and that's the hard-hitting verb.
Absolutely. What a wonderful technique and analogy to work through that way. So how long, based on your experience, if somebody engages with you to start to learn these techniques, Carla, how long before they can expect to see some progress with the application?
Immediate. And that's what people tell me, because these concepts are so simple and so easy to apply. I've had all sorts of folks say, thanks. Oh, God, I wish I'd known that 30 years ago. And they start applying it now. I have a chapter in there on email, how to write an email that people will actually read and that will actually elicit the response you want from them. It's super simple. And people walk out from these workshops or webinars and they start applying it now. And the other beauty about this is once you understand the concepts, then when you see other people's products come across your desk or your computer, you'll recognize that they could have said it shorter. They could have used a more concise verb. Words that hog space in a thoughtful manner is thoughtfully. In the nearer future is soon. Okay, again, bring it down. Write in the active voice, not passive voice. It's super easy. It's super fun, and it's so easy to learn and apply.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you have it. In a world that is probably skewed far too much towards instant gratification, this sounds like it's a great service that you offer to get people that instant gratification with the progress on learning this field, if I said that correctly. And there's not too many areas that people can actually do that, right? So I think that from a learning perspective, teaching perspective, this is definitely something as well. So the award-winning book is Right to Influence, and it's now in its second edition. And people can get this book, Carla, where? Everywhere?
Online.
Okay,
Amazon.
online. Amazon, Apple. Okay.
Apple, I think, Barnes and Nobles.
Okay,
and
great.
If they do happen to get it, if they would be so kind as to put in a little bit of a review, I would so appreciate that. Great.
Absolutely. Well, I know with your techniques, anybody picking up the book and applying the techniques, I'm sure they'd be delighted to do that as well, based on the impact that it would have. Carla, is there any final word or piece of advice that you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Yep. One more thing.
Sure.
If I ever got hit by a bus, I wanted to know I've done everything I could to help people. So I developed an online course. It's on teachable.com under the school Right to Influence. It's called Catapult Your Career, Right to Influence. It's a 3-hour, 7-module course, so you can do it as you want. Everything that I've spoken about, it brings the book to life, and it also infuses into that 3 hours all sorts of lessons learned from the 30 years in the Air Force career. So catapult your career, Right to Influence, on teachable.com.
Okay, we will make sure to provide those details over the weekend. I'll repost this conversation, as well, and we'll make sure we include those details in that as well, where people can get access to that as well. So Right to Influence is the name of the book. What is the best way for people to contact you, Carla, about if they're interested in hiring you?
Right. My email is carla@righttoinfluence.net. The website is righttoinfluence.net. I also send out a twice monthly Right to Influence quick tips newsletter with the anchor article is usually about 600 words. I spend inordinate amount of time. I value my readers' time, so I make sure that I spend their time wisely. So if anybody wants to receive that, they can also just shoot me an email at carla@righttoinfluence.net, and I'd be glad to add them to the list.
That's fantastic. And we'll make sure we put that in the repost as well, so that people know how to easily get access to you. Carla, thank you for a wonderful conversation. And I'd also like to applaud your efforts to dedicating your extensive experience in not only leadership, but proven tools and techniques to help people along their respective journeys in such a highly relevant area, because writing is definitely a very powerful tool. And knowing, if there's one message I'd love for everybody to take away from this conversation, it's a very basic one. And that is that anybody can do it. You can learn how to do this, and you can learn how to do it almost instantly. So there are some proven techniques, but sometimes you need to engage with professionals in order to do it this way. So I think that with that, Carla, it's time for us to sign off. And I appreciate, again, you coming on today. And I appreciate the audience. My apologies again for the technical difficulties, but we pulled it off anyway. despite that. And for those of you that I'm sure did tee up comments, hopefully we'll see those come through on the replay, and we'll make sure that we get some responses to those as well. So I'd like to thank everybody for that, and I'd like to thank my network and the those of you that not only engage but tune in to watch, and I'll look forward to seeing all of you again in the new year with another slate of spectacular guests that are lined up for the third straight year. So with that, happy Friday to everybody, and have